Hi, my name is Reza Houston, and if you're watching this, chances are you're in my summer 2019 Finance 300 Principles of Finance class. A little bit about myself. I am a professor at Ball State University. This is the end of my first year. Prior to that, I taught at Indiana State for 3 years, and prior to that, I taught at the University of Missouri and worked on my doctorate, and then also got my MBA, and then prior to that, I was an actuary. Now, let's talk about what we're going to be doing in this class. So, like the title says, this is the Principles of Finance class. What that really means is that we're going to be covering a lot of topics that you would see if you were doing a major in finance, but we're doing more of a cursory view of it. So, we'll study topics like financial management. We'll talk about capital budgeting. So, how do you select projects based on the value they'll add to your firm? How do you determine the cost of capital, aka the cost of raising money, either via equity issuance or bond issuance? We'll also talk about other topics like stock valuation, dividend distribution, etc. Now, if you do need to get a hold of me, there are a couple ways to do so. First, you can always email me. Email will be the best method to get a hold of me this summer, especially for the first 2 weeks, for the sole reason that I'll be in Shanghai for the first 2 weeks of the class. And so they're 12 hours ahead of us. So chances are if you're calling at noon, it'll be midnight local time. And so I'll always do my best to pick up, but it's better to just, if you need to get a hold of me immediately, just email me. I'll certainly respond to any phone calls you want to make to me. That number on our syllabus is in fact my cell phone number. So if you do need to use it, please use it. So those are the two best methods. Once I get back, so around May 30th, I will be able to be in the office as much as necessary. So if you do need a lot more hands-on tutoring, please reach out. I cannot stress that enough. With this kind of class, there will be a lot of struggles initially, especially when we get to chapters 4 and 5. I'll talk about those in a second, but those are the time value of money and bond valuation chapters, and they typically stump a lot of students. So just make sure that you're devoting enough time and reaching out to me as much as you need to. Now, in this class, we will be making use of Excel and then the BA2 calculator. You can use either, although I personally recommend that you use Excel. I'll show you how to use both in the lectures, but most people will typically teach you how to use a BA2 calculator to price securities or bonds. I think long term, I'm trying to move this more toward an Excel-based class, however. So I'll show you how to use both ways, but just know that on the exam, you will have the option to use both tools. Now, as far as what our objectives are in this course, we have several. First, we're going to talk about how do you invest. We're going to talk about the markets, what the NASDAQ is, what the New York Stock Exchange is, what the S&P 500 is. We're going to talk about how to value a stock, what ratios are important. We're going to talk about whether or not firms should pay dividends or whether they should issue new shares of stock, etc. We'll also talk about how you calculate an interest rate and why that's so important in the field of finance. And then finally, in the last couple chapters, we'll talk about capital management, in particular, short-term capital management. How do you manage, say, the cash of your firm and avoid something like a stock out, or let's say not being able to pay your suppliers, etc. But we'll see that in a couple of weeks. Now, the course textbook is going to be Corporate Finance, the 6th edition by Besley and Brigham. Now, although we have this listed here, I'll say this up front, you do not need an access code. I don't really care for the access codes. I think it's a bit of a money grab by the textbook publishers. So what I recommend is that if you can find a cheap used copy of our textbook, go ahead and get that. I write my own exams, so you will be able to use that to pass the class or work on the course material without the access code. So if you can find a cheap copy of Corporate Finance, the 6th edition, or even say the 5th or the 4th edition, those would probably be fine. Just know that there are going to be some slight differences that you should be aware of. I'll stick to what we have in the 6th edition, and I'll try to hug that material pretty tightly. So that's that. Now, I'm going to post all of our information, all of our course material via Canvas, which if you've not used it, it's very similar to Blackboard. I will say it really is Blackboard without a lot of the bugs. So I'll post all of our lecture material. I'll post all of our links to our lectures on there, and I'll post any review documents, any homeworks, anything like that on our Canvas site. Now, what's our class format going to be? Well, obviously, this is an online class, so our class format is a bit funky. I will have at least one video for you every single week. Depending on what chapter we're covering, that the length of the video and the number of videos will vary. So the first couple chapters we'll see a couple 15-minute videos each for each chapter, and then at the start of chapters 4 and 5, those are going to be the longest chapters we cover. The reason for that is because those are our time value of money chapters. And I will say upfront, give yourself enough time to learn the material before you take the quiz that we have for each of those chapters. I promise you those are going to be the hardest chapters we cover in the course. Now, as far as everything else goes, we will have regular quizzes, we will have 3 regular exams, and if you do need some kind of extension, if you do have some kind of disability, please reach out. I am willing to work with you. I typically just kind of skip over this stuff or do a cursory coverage of this stuff in the syllabus. If you have any kind of issues, please just reach out to me and let me know, and we can work on it. All right. The next stuff in the syllabus is obviously academic integrity. Just don't cheat. I think we're all adults here, so we can probably just skip by this for now. Now, let's talk about the material or the way that you're going to be graded. So if I scoot down here to our points, you're going to have really 3 types of assignments in this course. You're going to have a quiz at the end of every chapter, and those quizzes are going to be 20 points each. There'll be 20 questions. They'll just cover the chapter in question. And then I'll also be expecting you to write some chapter notes. And those will be essentially your notes on the lecture itself. And the reason I am doing this is the first time I've ever done this is because I want you to make sure that you've actually reviewed the lecture material. That's, I think, the biggest problem in online courses is that students just, from my experience, just try to take the quizzes and the exams and don't actually sit down and watch the lectures or read the lecture material. So this is my way of trying to incentivize you to actually sit down, watch the lecture, even if it's, say, at the gym, if you've got it up on your phone. Just make sure you watch the lecture, take some notes, and then I'll be asking you to upload those notes, and I'll give you credit for actually going through and making those notes. And then we will have an exam at the end of chapters 5, 10, and 15. So equidistant. All right, so your quizzes are going to be due fairly regularly, essentially starting at the end of our first week, so around 5:20-ish, we're going to start. That'll be our first due date for our first quiz, and then about every 4 days, since we only have, I believe, 6 or 8 weeks for this class, there's going to be a new quiz due. So for example, quiz 3, What I'll be expecting you to do is before 11:59 on May 27th, you'll need to have completed quiz 3. And you'll have 3 chances to take each quiz, and your grade will be dependent on your highest grade. So any questions, please just reach out. Those quizzes are pretty straightforward. Next, I guess I already talked about the chapter notes. Again, pretty straightforward. I'll expect probably at least a page worth of notes. I'll uh, and then you can upload those to our Canvas site, and then I'll basically be grading your notes. If you're just putting down a couple of bullet points, kind of you took 5 minutes to write something down that didn't really uh, involve what I covered in the lecture or what was covered in the textbook. You're probably not going to be getting too many points, but I will be trying to be a bit liberal with my grading there. Just if you've put together at least a page worth of notes, I mean bullet points or some other method, uh, chances are you're getting full credit on those. Next, let's talk about the exams. So, like I said, there will be 3 exams. They will not be cumulative, or at least we won't have a cumulative final. So the first exam will cover chapters 1 through 5, and I'll be giving you some time after the end of chapter 5 to take that exam. Exam 2 will cover chapters 6 through 10, and then exam 3 will cover chapters 11 through 15. The exams, you'll have an hour and 15 minutes, and each exam will be 40 questions, and it'll be worth a fair, I mean, each exam is going to be fairly sizable. I guess our breakdown in terms of points is 100 points. And so that's that. I guess I should probably change that to 2.5 points each. So total 100 points. Now, one thing I should say about our exams is that we're going to be using a software called Examity to take your exams. And I'll upload a document on Examity. You'll have to actually install or upload the add-in to your Canvas site. But the way these exams are going to work is you're going to download the Examity app into your Canvas, and then you're going to sign up for the time that you want to take each exam. So let's say you want to take exam 1. You'll have about a week and a half window to choose the time that you want to take the exam. And when you're ready to take the exam, you'll schedule the exam, and then at the time of the exam, you'll open your exam, and there will be a proctor on the other side of your computer. So you'll need to make sure that you have both your webcam activated, and then also you'll need to make sure that there's no one else in the room with you. The proctor will be essentially monitoring you the entire exam. So they'll make sure that you're not, I don't know, using a friend or using a second laptop, etc. Now, I will say I will be allowing you to use 1 page front and back of notes. I want to make this distinction or this important point as clear as I can. I know in the past, so I've taught this class 1 time, and I've used Examity in the past, and the proctors, for whatever reason, don't have a good grasp of when I say 1 page of notes front and back. They seem to give students a hard time. I'm going to put it down in the exam itself. I'll call the proctor Examity company and make sure that they know that as well. But if you get any pushback about using 1 page front and back of notes, push back and tell them my instructor allowed me to use those notes. I'll mention that again as we get closer to the exam. Just know that Examity, there are some issues. I think that's probably the biggest issue with Examity, even though it is a pretty good tool for us when you need to take exams. All right, a couple other things. In the run-up to the exam, I will be posting an exam review, and that exam review will be the closest thing that I can put together that will give you a sense of what will be on those exams. It'll be typically 30, 35 questions, so a little shorter than the actual exam, but it will be very similar, or the questions will be very similar to those that I would ask you on the exam. I literally write the review at the same time I'm writing the exam. So if you're looking for something to study, study that exam review. All right, that's that. Our grading scale is pretty straightforward, just standard Ball State grading scale. I do round up. If you have like an 89.5, I'll round up to an A minus. That seems pretty straightforward. So let's talk about what we're going to be covering this semester. So our schedule is pretty straightforward. We're going to start out with some basic topics. What is managerial or corporate finance? Then we'll talk about how we analyze financial statements, aka we'll talk about ratios. And then we'll talk about what's called the financial environment, or the exchanges, the big players in the market. So what's an institutional investor, who are defined as individual investors, etc. And then, like I said, chapters 4 and 5, that's where things get hairy. The time value of money in chapter 4, this is the most important concept in all of finance. I mean, if there is one thing that you should take away from this class, it is the time value of money formula and how to use it. Everything we do in finance, every valuation we make, every company we analyze, it all comes from the time value of money. I mean, every valuation uses the time value of money formula, and I can't stress how important that is. And because it's so important, the lectures for that chapter are a bit longer, so definitely devote a little more time, or make sure that you allot a little more time for chapter 4 and then also chapter 5, which builds on it. All right, as we get later in the course, the middle of the course, we'll talk about bonds. So I guess we'll talk about bonds in chapter 5, but the heart of the bond discussion is chapter 6. And then chapter 7, we'll get into stocks, how we value them. We'll talk about the capital asset pricing model, or the CAPM for short. And then we'll start talking about how we determine which projects are more lucrative than others. So that'll wrap up our coverage of the middle portion of the material. And then the latter part of the course will involve estimations of the cost of capital and calculation of the ideal capital structure and dividend policy. And then finally we'll wrap up with a discussion of how you manage your short-term assets and your short-term liabilities. So that's that. As you can see over here on the right-hand side of the syllabus, we do have a due date for everything. So, for example, this due date of 5/19/2019, what that indicates is that you need to make sure that you have read the chapter, watched the videos for that chapter, uploaded your chapter notes, and taken quiz 1 as many times as you needed to get the score you wanted by 11:59 of 5/19, aka that Sunday night of the first week of this course. Our exam 1, you can take it at any time between this window, so from 5:31 to 6:11, and then I guess it's pretty straightforward from there. So that's that. If you want to know why we're covering each chapter, I've got a breakdown later in the document, but that's more or less it. If you do have any questions, or you do want to get some additional help with regard to how to work some problems, please reach out to me early. I cannot stress that enough. With an online course, by the time we get to the final week, I mean, the grades are pretty much locked in, and so I want to stress that if you're having problems with, say, a time value of money question, or you're just struggling to understand the material, reach out to me early. I mean, it's hard for me to overstate how important that is. I don't want to be put in that position where someone is reaching out saying, I didn't understand the material, and I have to take the final, and I need a 95 to pass, and they've not reached out prior to like 2 days before the end of the course. I always hate, being a bit hard on students when they try, when they come to me and say that. So I just want you to know that if you do need some tutoring or any additional guidance, I am happy to put in a couple extra hours. I mean, if you want to meet on a regular basis, either via Skype or in person, I'm happy to do so, but please let me know early. So, with that, I'm going to wrap up. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. And good luck in the course. Thank you.